Bloodlines. The Star Trek Castlevania mashup we've been waiting for is finally here.
Really, there are a lot of things that are called Bloodlines. I was thinking of a Jonny Quest episode called Bloodlines, but okay.
Nobody knows what Jonny Quest is.
The Enterprise encounters an unmanned probe, and Worf tells Picard that he's being hailed by name. The probe projects a hologram onto the bridge of Bok, the Ferengi who showed up way back in the battle.
Which was freaking season 1.
But he's played by a different actor this time, Lee Arenberg, who was in RoboCop 3, and the Pirates of the Caribbean movies, I guess.
So they finally exhausted all the RoboCop 2 actors and just had to move on to the next one. Bok says he's still mad that Picard killed his son, and that he has found Picard's son, named Jason Vigo, so it's going to be a Ghostbusters tie-in too, and he will kill him as revenge.
Picard tells Worf to make sure the probe is safe to beam it aboard and examine it, and he tells Data to look up Jason, beginning with researching Miranda Vigo.
So let's make sure we have everything straight. A bad guy from season 1, who was also a stupid Ferengi, is introducing us to an up until now unknown relative of a bridge officer. The shit of past and present has come together in an impressive display of things I could not care less about.
Agreed. And Picard tells Riker to contact the Ferengi and find out why Bok was reinstated as a daemon.
Later, Riker tells Picard that Miranda does have a son named Jason, who is now 23 years old, but that's really all they know. So Picard decides right then and there that they're going to go find Miranda and Jason, and I hope that they weren't currently on any sort of mission.
They go to the planet that Miranda and Jason are supposed to be on, and Data scans a suspected location. He doesn't find Miranda, but he does find an unknown male approximately Jason's age 2 kilometers under the ground.
They assume he's in danger, and they beam him onto the ship, but I thought they couldn't beam people if they were too deep underground.
They just added some power to the beaming stuff.
And it turns out Jason was just rock climbing.
When he tells Picard that he wasn't in danger and they should just send him back, he resumes the comical pose that he beamed in on. That he beamed in.
Picard fills Jason in on the situation, and Jason tells Picard that Miranda died a few years ago, and agrees to a genetic test.
Jason is played by Ken Oland, whose claim to fame was being in the hit film Leprechaun.
Just the first one?
Yes, just the first one.
Beverly performs the genetic test, impressively avoiding transforming Jason into a rat or lizard.
And while she's doing that, Picard asks Jason about his life, and Jason reveals that he is unemployed, which shouldn't matter since they don't use money in the future anyway.
And Beverly tells Picard that he is Jason's father,
resulting in a comical exchange of looks between Picard and Jason.
Later, Picard is showing Jason his cool collection of artifacts, and Jason really isn't interested, and Picard awkwardly tries to learn more about Jason, but he really isn't interested in that either.
Picard shows Jason an alien back scratcher that is very valuable to him, but Jason treats it like the cheap prop that it really is.
Bet that flute doesn't even work.
Picard tells Jason that he didn't know Miranda very long, and that if she had told him that he had a son, he would have been involved in his life. But Jason says maybe she didn't want that, and asks to be taken back to the planet.
He also asks why Bok wants to kill him, and Picard tells them about their history, and says they need to find Bok before Jason can leave. On the bridge, Data says Bok, a Ferengi, one of the dumbest aliens we've encountered on this show, have somehow managed to encrypt the probe's origins in such a way that both he and Geordi can't figure it out, which seemed very unrealistic.
You're assuming that the whole race is all equally dumb, and that they're just incapable of anything, even though they have space travel. Do you have space travel? How many times have you been out into space?
Enough.
Okay.
The only smart Ferengi we've ever seen is Dr. Sunshield.
There you go.
And they killed him for it. But based on what the probe has on it physically, they think they can track where it came from that way.
Damon Berta hails the Enterprise and tells Picard that Bok is not a daemon and was imprisoned 6 years ago but bought his way out 2 years ago. So I'm sure we'll be getting that spin-off any time now. And he gives Picard a very vague hint as to where Bok might be before signing off, but Data and Geordi are immediately able to tie it in with what they know from the probe and figure out where he is. and I wondered why he would even bother giving an accurate hint if he clearly didn't expect them to figure it out anyway. Thought that was weird.
Picard goes to talk to Beverly about Jason, saying he needs to talk to a parent, but for some reason went to Beverly, the woman whose son just left a few episodes ago as some kind of omnipotent super being who can bend time and space to his will. But I guess that makes sense, since Jason likes to climb rocks, and those are pretty much the same thing.
Picard says that Jason keeps everything to himself and won't let Picard in, and Beverly points out that Picard has suddenly shown up after more than 20 years. Picard says maybe he should just leave Jason alone and let him open up if he wants to, and she asks if he's doing what's best for Jason or easiest for himself. But Picard already tried talking to Jason, and he's clearly not interested, so Beverly is just being a bitch for no reason. That was my conclusion.
Troy goes to see how Jason is doing, and he immediately starts hitting on her, which must be annoying and awkward since she can immediately sense what people are feeling as soon as she walks in the room. And I thought it was pretty funny how off guard she was when she said, "You know what, if you don't want to talk to me as a counselor, then I'll leave." And he just says, "Okay, bye." It was a moment that really pointed out how the people in charge of this ship are so used to getting what they want.
And when she leaves, she says Jason can make an appointment to talk later, and idiot Jason seems to think that's an invitation, and somehow doesn't notice that she clearly realizes that he's nothing but a huge douche. In his quarters that night cycle, Picard seems to see Bach, telling him that he will kill Jason no matter what Picard does, and when he calls for security, Bach has disappeared.
Later, he's talking to Worf and Geordi about it, and I'm glad that he brought up the mind sphere from that other Bach episode, but Geordi says it's probably not that this time.
But he'll do some extra scans of Picard's quarters just in case, which apparently he wasn't planning on doing before they suggested that.
And, I wouldn't have been surprised if it was that, because we're already rehashing a bunch of crap from past seasons, so why not?
Picard tells Worf to assign extra security to Jason, and then Data comes in with reports about Jason's criminal history, mostly relating to trespassing in the caves.
In 10 Forward, Worf is assigned 2 security officers to keep an eye on Jason, who tells them to f*** off before his hands start shaking uncontrollably. Then Picard pops in and says, "Hey, you like rocks? Well, the holodeck has a bunch of rocks. Maybe we could go check out rocks together. What do you say, son?" And it's awkward as hell, and weird because Jason is not 5 years old. He's an adult.
And he tells Picard that as soon as Bach is dealt with, he's leaving, and then he ditches him.
And as he's leaving, Picard says, "Rock on, son."
Okay, I was coming up with something better than that, but okay. I was going to say he was as impervious as granite, something about his...
That's way too smart. And Picard is annoyed that Jason is just... I'm trying to think of how we could do igneous with ignore, but that's not really working.
He's trying to dig through those sedimentary layers to get down to his true heart.
What? Jason just says, "I'm going to go get stoned. Leave me alone." And Picard says, "I'm not going to take our relationship for granted."
Oh, jeez.
Okay, we have to keep going.
All right. The Enterprise encounters another probe in the area where they expected to find Bach.
And when Picard asks why they didn't detect it, Worf says it must have been cloaked. So why can't ships just send out cloaked bombs that detonate on impact? They don't even have to be there. They could say, "Yeah, I sent out a bomb, I cloaked it, and I sent it to the Enterprise. And when it reaches them, it'll just blow up." You know what? Send out 12 bombs, just in case.
That is a good question. And this probe even explodes all of a sudden. And Data finds a message hidden in a pattern of light and dark in the explosion, saying, "My revenge is at hand." So what was the point of sending out that probe? What if they didn't find the message? It would just be some random probe that exploded.
In his ready room, Picard suddenly sees Bach in his chair, who doesn't say anything new for quite a while, and then he leaves.
Okay, yeah, I guess that sums that scene up. Beverly responds to an emergency medical call from Jason's security team and finds him twitching on the ground. I assumed he was just throwing a tantrum, but it turns out it's a seizure.
Once she stabilizes him, she says he has a hereditary degenerative neurological condition, and Picard doesn't have it, and they don't know if Miranda had it.
So Beverly says it may have been caused by a random mutation.
And she knows about random mutations because she just transformed everyone into freaking animals. She's an expert.
When Jason leaves, Picard lies to Beverly and tells her that she was right about how he should handle their relationship. And he tells her in practically a whisper that Jason has a criminal record, and if he had been around, Jason might have turned out better.
And after Beverly gives him the obvious statement award, she tells him to focus on the here and now.
Geordi and Data scan the chair that Bach was sitting in and find out that Bach must have used a subspace transporter.
which is unreliable and unstable. And they think if he does it again, they can track him.
They say the Federation abandoned research in that area, and that form of transport could be done from light years away. But that seems like that would be a very valuable thing to keep researching.
No, they gotta focus on the soliton waves where they push a ship with water or whatever the hell they did.
Yeah, because that's so much more practical.
Picard is worried that Bach will be able to transport Jason away, but Geordi says they can track him if they tie the driver quacking relays to sync with the pelomorphous scorabulators.
Picard finds Jason climbing in the holodeck while his security detail awkwardly watches, and he tells them to wait outside.
And then we get a sweet montage of Patrick Stewart's stunt double climbing a fake rock.
It was probably horizontal too. They just tilted the camera.
Yeah, they watched Adam West do it. They figured we can do it too.
Picard tells Jason he likes climbing and having his fate in his own hands, and they bond a little bit. And he tells Jason about how they might be able to locate Bach's ship.
When he asks him about Miranda, he learns that she was a very selfless person.
And she was killed when she tried to fight back against a pair of thieves. Picard tells Jason he wants to be a father to him, and talks about how he and his own father didn't have a good relationship.
Jason says he won't want to be his dad after he learns about his criminal past. But Picard says, yeah, I know about your criminal past.
But I'm still your father. And then they bond some more. It was so touching.
Their connection was as solid as a rock.
Beverly calls Picard to sickbay, where she says she has to tell him something about the scans she was doing. But of course, we don't find out what that something is until later.
And right at that moment, Bach uses his transporter to beam Jason off the ship. And Geordi tries to counter-transport him, however the hell that works.
And when Bach first tries to beam him out, Data says he's picking up a subspace carrier wave approaching the ship. But how does he pick up the wave before it gets there?
And as Jason was being transported away, Picard tried to run up and, grab him? That probably would have ended very poorly for everybody.
Picard goes to the bridge, and Data tells him that they might not be able to track the signal of Bach after all. And Worf picks up another probe that is sending a transmission of Bach, repeating the same dialogue he's been saying all episode, but now he has Jason.
In space handcuffs.
And Data says it turns out they can track the transporter beam to the location of Bach's ship.
But even at top speed, they won't get there in time, so Picard says, beam me over, using their unreliable, unstable method.
Geordi says they can transport him over there, but they might not be able to bring him back. And Picard says they can figure that out later. So apparently he's using the same techniques that the writers use when they write these episodes.
He appears on Bach's ship, and says that while Miranda is Jason's mother, Picard is not his father, and Bach had resequenced Jason's DNA. The Ferengi, the dumbest aliens in this show, can resequence other species' DNA.
I mean, he could have hired somebody else to do it, you don't know.
No, he did it himself because he messed up.
Well, there you go, he wasn't that good at it. And that's what caused Jason's neurological disorder.
Oh, is that what that was?
Yeah, see, it all ties together. It's a very well-written, well-constructed episode.
So he really messed this dude up.
Yeah, I mean, he was going to die eventually.
Picard also lets Bach's crew know that Bach is full of shit and is not a daemon, and just did all of this for revenge, not money. So they all turn on him.
Spouting out a dumbly comical comment about how there is no profit for them in Bach's plan.
See, you even called them dumb, but they resequence DNA and transport light years away.
I said the comment was dumb. A dumbly comical comment.
Uh-huh.
Later, the Enterprise returns to Jason's planet, and Jason tells Picard that Beverly says he should completely recover from his condition. How convenient.
But tells him if he starts to crave eating crickets, he's probably turning into some kind of lizard.
And Picard asks if he wouldn't want to stay on the Enterprise for a while, but Jason says he has to straighten out his life on the planet. Even though it sounds like his life was total crap, and I would think he would just want to leave.
Yeah, it sounded pretty rocky down there.
Oh, jeez. When they head to the transporter room, Picard tells Jason he put a gift in his bag, and Jason pulls out the alien back scratcher. Yeah, you can finish off there, I guess.
The end. Bloodlines. Overall?
I wasn't expecting the writers to suddenly pull out something from freaking season 1, and not even a particularly memorable character or episode, as evidenced by the fact that he wasn't even played by the same guy. It seemed like they were really stretching to try to find something with some kind of emotional connection to something that happened earlier that they could bring up now. Just this season, we already saw Worf's brother suddenly show up, then his future adult son. We learned about Troy's secret sister and Riker's double, Geordi's mother, Data's mother, and even Beverly's grandmother's ghost boyfriend. So Picard suddenly having an unknown son was not really a huge surprise for them to throw out at this point. What I was more surprised by was the fact that it turned out to not really be his son. Jason's acting, I thought, didn't really fit with the show, and his entire character reminded me of the outrageous Okana. What a great episode to remind me of. He did get less irritating as the episode went on, but despite them trying to make him a troubled character and give him some background and everything, there really wasn't much to him. He was pretty uninteresting throughout. And that's true also for Bach, who just kept spouting out the same dialogue over and over again, and then the episode was over.
Easy paycheck for him.
And I've been watching Deep Space Nine concurrently with this show, and they actually made the Ferengi interesting in that show and gave them some depth, made them feel like real characters. But with this episode, you would think that none of that had ever happened, and it really feels like going back to the way they were portrayed in Season 1, as being just stupid and very simplistic and just dumb. So that was very disappointing, and that pretty much sums up the entire episode. You would think having a plot that it almost entirely focuses on Picard finding out that he has a secret son would be more interesting, even if it turns out it's not really his son. But this episode really didn't do much for me. I gave it a C-.
I give this one a D+. Why did all of Bach's messages have to come via probe? That actually ended up working against him, since it turned out they could track him more easily that way. Data and Geordi basically scraping the dirt off of it to figure out where it came from seems to completely defeat the purpose of anyone trying to hide where any object came from ever. They even pointed out how the message itself was encrypted beyond their knowledge, and that was enough. And that whole light and darkness hidden in the message, what the hell was that? There was a bunch of stuff in this episode that was either totally unnecessary or could have used a lot more explanation. Like Jason's illness. What was the point of that? Beverly would have figured out Bach's DNA resequencing eventually anyway, right?
Yeah, it seemed like they stuck that in as kind of a clue to the audience that he wasn't really Picard's son, but that doesn't make the episode more interesting in any way.
And it wasn't even really a clue. It would have been if they had said neither Picard nor Miranda had this condition, but they straight up said, we don't know if she did. So she could have, and it could have come from her.
Yeah, I guess they didn't want to make it too obvious, but then what's the point of even putting it in there? I don't know.
And like you said, this is yet another Season 7 random relative episode. Were they really so out of ideas they just kept recycling this one thing? And this wasn't even the first episode where Picard had a son, or at least a pseudo-son, because that happened in Suddenly Human. And in that case, his son figure was actually a kid, not an adult, so the way Picard treated him and the way he tried to approach him made a little more sense. But the biggest missed opportunity throughout this whole episode was not having anyone talk to Worf. Suddenly finding out you're a father and having to coexist with your son, even though you come from completely different worlds. Too bad there's nobody on the ship Picard could relate to. Even Worf himself could have approached Picard or Jason, and it would have made sense. And there were points where Worf was standing in the same room with both of them. He just kind of looked at him and then turned around and walked away. Maybe he just said, I'm not dealing with this shit. This was a completely throwaway episode. And if we're going to start throwing in villains from Season 1, where the hell is Armis? He's still down there in his tar pit. What about the mega god who kills people that step on flowers? What about the conspiracy slugs?
That's what I want to see come back.
The best one would have been a tie-in where Jason was rock climbing, but it turned out that Bach had formed an alliance with the sentient rocks from home soil.
You're just giving them ideas for Picard Season 12 or whatever.
Yeah, they'll get a transmission in the opening before the title. I don't know if they even do that for Picard anymore, but it'll be all echoey, and they'll say, we can only make out some words, and then you'll just hear in a really distorted, echoey voice,
ugly bags of mostly water.
See, what I could see them doing is have it turn out that Jason actually is his son, and use that as a way to kind of continue the show following Picard's son.
Star Trek Picard, The Next Generation. So we're gearing up to the end of this season. I'm ready for it, because everyone says it's really good. It better be. So hopefully you can stick with us until then, and not just skip all of these episodes and wait until we get to that one.
Like we wish we could.
Thanks for watching.